Oops. Hello, my fellow readers. It's I, Dark Symphony 7 with another fanfiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, and leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story. Now, the story I'm reviewing is episode 21 of the Super Koopalings series, Sherlock Holmes. And honestly, this is honestly out of the last four stories. About four like the last couple stories. This is probably the anomaly I mentioned so much in the previous video, but I thought I'd mention it here again. This one's kind of weird in how it presents itself because, on one hand, you have a kind of average story. Like out of the last four stories, this is probably the weakest one. Mainly because it falls prey to the problem that plagues some other stories that Starlit Duck has done, in the fact that it's kind of hamstrung by the length itself. And the story is just short of 20,000 words, so it's not a long story at all. But it still kind of backfires on itself simply because of its length, kind of curtailing it as much detail as possible. But on the other hand, it has a very poignant lesson that I think, even with how short the story is very well done. So this one is very much a tale of two ways you look at it. Either you take it as just a story on its own merits, without the lesson attached to it, or you take the story and you apply it based on how the lesson was done. These kind of it's a very weird one, but I'll talk about it more near the end because I think the bulk of the video is going to be talking more about that lesson rather than this story. So apologies to Star. Sorry about that. So let's start the actual review. So the plot actually starts with Ludwig and Lemmy setting up for an orchestra. Ludwig is about to play a symphony, and Lemmy is actually the opening act. He's basically going to do a comedy show and just goof off and be clown. He's Lemmy! and he basically makes everyone laugh. After the symphony, they go out in the foyer where they meet a music critic, who's there to rate and review Ludwig's work. Lemmy, getting ahead of himself, asks the critic to review his comedy show. The critic agrees, and then the next day, the review comes out and the critic completely trashes Lemmy's show. Alright, sorry, I got distracted for a second. Where was I? Oh yeah. So yeah, Lemmy reads a review, is completely devastated because the critic, doesn't like the comedy show. He thinks it was too passe, it was disrespectful, and all those other critic buzzwords. Lemmy doesn't take it well, and so he kind of closes himself off for a little bit from his siblings, and then he finds a Sherlock Holmes costume, which is basically a Koopa version of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes being a very famous fictional detective that pretty much anyone knows. If you watch Disney in the 1970s and you heard of a movie called Great Mouse Detective, yeah, that's not based on Sherlock Holmes. That's based off Basil Baker Street, which was a book series from the 1950s. So yeah, but Basil Baker Street was based off Sherlock Holmes, but loosely based off it, but that's the point. So Lemmy turns himself into Sherlock Holmes, and he wants to solve mysteries. He basically deluded himself into believing he's Sherlock Holmes, and Ludwig von Koopa is Watson. So basically, they go on a couple of mysteries, trying to find them. They start harassing people. Ludwig is completely uncomfortable throughout the entire story because he's trying to figure out what is going on, because he realizes something's going on with Lemmy. So he proposes the whole trying to find out what's wrong with Lemmy in the form of a mystery. what happened to Lemmy Koopa? And so he kind of separates Lemmy, who's pretending to be Shellock, and Lemmy Koopa as like two separate people, hoping Lemmy can kind of figure out everything on his own and hopefully try to help him out with that. And it kind of works for a little bit, and then they go to the critics, and then Lemmy goes completely off the deep end, accuses Ludwig of murdering Lemmy Koopa. Yeah, I know, yeah, I know the logic leap through that. Sends Ludwig to jail. Ludwig manages to get out of jail by basically calling Bowser and basically getting amnesty because like Bowser like completely confused, like it's like, hey son, how you doing? Listen, father, I'm in jail. Why are you in jail? Lemmy thinks I killed him. I just saw Lemmy outside the door. Like, yeah, it's a long story. Can you let me out of jail? Sure. Just don't interrupt my chess match with Kamek. You're learning chess? Kind of. But yeah, so basically, Ludwig manages to get out of jail, goes back to the castle, finds pretty much just Iggy just sitting down, doing nothing, and watching TV. And basically said the rest of the Koopalings went to find Lemmy because Lemmy just went so far off the deep end that he's basically about to murder a Koopa. Like it's like Koopa is like a regular kid is like in a building. Lemmy in his mind, I will say the kid is underneath a rubble building. I gotta use bombs to blow up the building to get him out, but that will kill him. So all the Koopalings actually go and stop Lemmy, and during along that we get a lot of clues that basically Lemmy just really didn't take the criticism well, and it ends with the lesson when Lemmy stops being Sherlock Holmes and they burn the suit and all that. That criticism is you shouldn't truly hold on to all criticisms. And I think that's a very poignant lesson. Like it's more complicated than that. But the long and short of it is, the lesson is you shouldn't let criticism define you when you're doing any sort of art, whether it be movies, writing, performance art, like what Lemmy did with his clown show. Granted, Lemmy kind of shot himself in the foot because honestly, he has to music critic. Music critics are going to have different standards than, say, an art critic, which probably make more sense. I don't know how you would critique a clown show, but I guess an art critic would probably be your best bet. It's like that's literally like asking a music critic to play Castlevania. Said you have to play this game. It's like, what about the music? It's like you gotta no, not Castlevania. Devil May Cry 5, because everyone knows that game actually kind of has a weird way of doing the soundtrack where you actually get a better soundtrack as you play better in the game. So it's like you get like muted sounds, but as you rise through the ranks, the music actually gets like better. It gets like percussion and vocals and all that stuff. It's really weird. It's like I said. Having someone who critiques music, they play Devil May Cry, they don't know how to play the game. It's like you gotta critique the music. It's like, but I don't know how to play the game. Is like, do I just have to mash buttons? It's Devil May Cry, so no, no mashing. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And of course, he wouldn't react negatively to it because he's just not familiar with how gaming stuff works. It's basically the same thing as this. Lemmy, in his haste, asked someone who's not very familiar in properly critiquing, say, like a clown show, a comedy show, because he's a music critic. He's there to critique Ludwig stuff. That's what he's good at. So that leads to the situation, to the whole situation, and the lesson being, again, don't take criticism. I'm trying best to define this, because criticism is a very broad term. That's why I actually wanted to dedicate a large portion of this video to talking about this lesson, because it's just a very well done lesson that honestly needs to be talked about, and the fact that how to deal with criticism. Like, if you want to deal with criticism, you shouldn't dwell on it like Lemmy did. That's why Lemmy went off the deep end. He read the words, he didn't like what they said, and he dwelled on it, and it kind of consumed him mentally until he kind of snapped and became Sherlock Holmes. You shouldn't do stuff like that. Criticism on its own is technically supposed to be a good thing, but it's all based on how you see things. Like, you can have like the whole point of criticism is just, this is just my opinion of what needs improving, what's good about it, and stuff like that. But then again, you have critics who nowadays, they're more concerned about being overtly negative. It's why I like, one of my favorite movie scenes of all time is the Anton Ego speech from Ratatouille, because he kind of openly admits that, yeah, people like negative reviews, they like trashing stuff, but you have to realize that sometimes that's not always going to work in every situation. And you shouldn't, when it comes to criticism, like, there's like a fine line between taking criticism, denying criticism, and just dwelling on it. It's like a very fine line between those three. I'm doing a horrible job at presenting this lesson, I just realized. But bear with me. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there. Everyone should at least respect the fact that someone's gonna criticize. When you do something like release a painting, or write a fan fiction, or make a movie, there are going to be people from various points of views, with various opinions and various preferences, that are always going to have an opinion on it. And with that logic, you shouldn't really dwell on just generic criticism, like, oh, it's just like a common thing in fan fiction reviews is just saying good chapter, and it's like, it's fine, but tell me the details, tell me everything. But there are going to be people who are basically going to harass you, they're going to insult you and belittle you and treat you like shit just because of any reason. Like, they could just simply not like the type of story you're trying to present, they could just be complete assholes and try and troll you. It could be a bait, like they're deliberately acting like this to get a rise out of you, which you shouldn't really do. It's like I said, the whole idea of criticism. Alright, Mama, another thing happened. So yeah, with it, this is just a hard thing to talk about, because I myself am I fancy myself as a critic, but I fancy myself as saying, like, okay, here's why something didn't work for me, but this might work for someone else. It's very hard to quantify exactly how to approach criticism as a broad term, because in a way everyone kind of has like two different, like, it's just a weird, it's so hard to define, it's just so hard to talk about, because I like the lesson of Ludwig telling Lemmy, you shouldn't dwell on the criticism, because, that's just one person. That's just one person's take. That's just one person. In the story, everyone else laughed at Lemmy. Like, because they found it funny. Yeah, I personally didn't find it funny because it was just a lot of slapstick humor, and I think, well, some of it was good. Uh, Overall, I just didn't like it, but that's just my opinion, you know. But when it comes to criticism, you should learn how to understand where the line is drawn between helpful criticism and hurtful criticism. And that depends on the story, because some authors are very, very stubborn, and just being kind and helpful is not gonna work. So sometimes you have to hammer in the point to the point of possibly just yelling at the guy, saying, "No, what this is doing is very horrible for the context of the story. You need to fix it. It does not work." And that could really apply to literally all mediums. Sometimes there's the whole point with the banana with the artist with the banana. She got 10,000 from it from another art critic, but a lot of people were pointing out I'm pretty sure she did that just to make the money. There's a lot of opinions on that. Some people are oh, it's the destruction of art because it's a banana. It's literally just a banana taped to a wall. Some people are being oh, she got an easy paycheck because she got 10 grand. She literally got 10 grand from someone who's just literally just so vapid he doesn't give a shit.
What is a man?
And there's a lot you can
pile of secrets. But enough talk.
And that plays into the overall structure of the story. Hence why I said this is just a very weird anomaly. If you take away the lesson, the lesson the story is trying to tell you, then the story kind of falls apart. It's still good. It's still good, but it's just really, really needed that lesson to really hammer home how well done the story needed to be. But seriously, criticism bad. Criticism is good and bad. I'm so cringing over how poorly I'm thinking this through. Yeah. So you should understand the difference between helpful and hurtful. Sometimes it's very dependent on the author's state of mind and how bad the problem is. But you should also realize that the author doesn't have to take criticism. Hence why I say whenever I do at the end, or what I change, the changes are just advice. You don't have to change the advice, and I have been wrong before. You don't have to. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. It would just, because it's just my opinion. That's what I would change. Someone else would come along and say the same things I did, but change it in a completely different way. That's just how artwork works as a very malleable form, and the fact that everyone is a critic. Everyone's gonna be a critic. The author also has to take in consideration not to come off as too much of a jerk. A large problem with what was that name of that author? I was that made that comment. Christian Chandler. A lot of problems that he had in life was mainly due to the fact he just couldn't take criticism, and he always intentionally went after the critics. And that's another thing you should never do, because if even a mild thing can set you off, then everyone's gonna just basically turn into sharks and just circle you, and just basically start deliberately harassing you, and deliberately giving out bad reviews because you want that reaction. That's just the game of how this works. Criticism is just a very complicated topic to talk about. I may make a video just talking about it in general, my opinion. But I'll probably have someone else with me. Who knows? That's up to you. That's up to me. It's my channel. I can technically do what I want with it, except for the fan fiction. I can just I take suggestions soon. But yeah, I do like the story. I do like the direction it went in. I really like the lesson, how it was used in the story. It's just really short, like too short. Like I said, take out that lesson. This story goes from good to like very average. Characters. There's really only one character to talk about, and that's Lemmy. I would want to talk about Ludwig, but he doesn't really experience that much character growth or character development in that story, in this story specifically, because this is just all about Lemmy. This is all about going through that lesson. Lemmy cuts a pathetic figure. He's very happy at the beginning of the story, and then once he reads the critiques, he's very closed off. He starts yelling at his brothers and sister. And then when he turns into Sherlock Holmes, he's just completely delusional of wanting to solve mysteries. So he finds a person named Henry, I think her buttocks or something like that. Goes to her house, finds out she's like never really been kidnapped, accuses her husband of kidnapping him, and then attacking him. And Ludwig's like, "I'm sorry." And it's very possible how far gone Lemmy has deluded himself, because he's just so broken over the fact that someone negatively critiqued his work, like someone didn't like his work. Yeah, it's very well done. And again, without that lesson, Lemmy's character would actually kind of fall apart, which is astounding when you say the story kind of such heavily relies on that lesson. Grammar errors. I didn't see any grammar errors. I think there might have been one grammar error, but I can't. But I think that might have been intentional. I think it's my mind is still frazzled over a lot of stuff that's been happening lately. So, more likely wrong on that. Pacing. I do think the pacing is good. It's short and sweet, and it's kind of zooms through. Like, you don't want this story to be slow unless you want to really hammer that lesson down. But it's just fast enough to say, hey, it's happening. Because, they find, like, Lemmy and Ludwig, they find the girl, and then it just goes to them finding her house, and then harassing her, and then attacking the husband, and then, stuff like that. And then after that, they go back to the castle, look at a newspaper. It's very brief, but it works well in the sense of how everything is presented. Again, it's very much carried by that lesson. So, would I recommend this story? I would. Unless that... Sorry, my eye is irritating me. Like something fierce. I would recommend the story. However, this story is so very tied to the whole critique lesson. Because again, everyone is a critic. You should listen to critics, but you should not listen to them sometimes. It's just a complicated thing. It's just a complicated mess criticism is. But yeah, I would recommend this. Favorite part is the lesson. I just think the lesson was very well thought out, very well done. You shouldn't dwell on criticism because it will consume your entire life. It's like saying people obsessed with social media becoming so obsessed with getting likes on Twitter or likes on Facebook or views on TikTok. Those garbage websites, because they're so obsessed with it, they can't think of a life without it. That's kind of bad, like very bad. What is there anything I would change about this story? There's another thing that would be theoretically very hard to do, because when changing a story like this, you have to take into consideration the lesson it's teaching. Because if you try and change the story, you're at risk of possibly either changing the lesson or destroying the lesson, are completely invalidating the lesson itself. So it's like so it's kind of like Minesweep from all that time ago, where technically you don't have to change anything, but I do think maybe make the story longer, just kind of have them humor Shellock at first, and then they realize how kind of deep off the deep end it is. Then they try and go, maybe have the other Koopalings help out, just get them more involved. Maybe have the critic give his side of the story, his full side of the thing, and go a little more detail into him personally, or maybe just have him involved a little bit more. Like there's so much stuff that theoretically could be changed, but it would just be a problem because that might ruin the story, the lesson the story is trying to teach you. So it's just a really complicated matter. So that's everything about Shellock. She just, I pretty much bungled my whole thing on criticism, mainly because criticism's just not an easy thing to talk about. I mean, if you want me to do another video just talking about criticism, leave it in the comment section below. I like to hear your opinions on it. I like to hear your thoughts on criticism as a whole. Like, do you think, like, how do you take criticism? How do you deal with criticism and stuff like that? Do you ignore it? Do you dwell on it? You know, I want to hear your opinions on that. But this has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.